Hello YouTube! So I'm making this video because I actually had a question. What roles/lanes are challenger players playing in League of Legends? So I had this question, I did a project on this in the past, and I want to bring that up to date and sort of use this video as a way to teach you guys a bit about the Riot API as well. Speaking about the Riot API, if you want to learn more, I have an entire course dedicated to this. So it's at Riot API Bootcamp at Thinkific.com. I'll pin a comment about this as well, but essentially this course will bring you from knowing nothing all the way up to building your app at the end. I noticed when I was learning to use the Riot API, there wasn't really a lot of resources out there, so I built this to help you get started. So in short, here's my thesis. If every lane was played equally, they would see a 20% representation among challengers. So if you only care about that data, it's right here on the slide. If you win more, you'll climb higher and you'll be more represented in challenger. So from our data that we're going to be going through and coding up and working with, we can see at least at this time on patch 12.5 in NA Challenger, support is the most represented at 26%, and top is the least represented at 13.33%, which I would mention 13.33% is pretty low, because remember, if they're played equally, it would be at 20%. So if you're here for the stats, here's the stats. So let's talk about how to code this. What we'll need from the Riot API is a list of the challenger players. There's a description on how to do this in the Riot API Bootcamp Project 5. The solution's out there on my channel. The second one being the most recent match data. This is the project number 4. Solution's also on my channel. And then once we have this match data, we want to look at the role/lane in each match. Let's hop over to the code to see how to do that. So first up, let's write some basic information here. I've imported LOL Watcher from the Riot Watcher environment. This is what allows us to access the Riot API. I've loaded a library that allows me to load in my API key rather easily, as well as this time and OS functionality from Python. So first up, let's load the configuration data. So you can see here I've used load_.env from a config file, and I've gone ahead and pulled out my Riot API key from that. Then I've stored it as LOL Watcher and then deleted my API key. The reason for this is so my API key doesn't show up on the internet, because remember, that API key tells Riot Games that you are allowed to access it. So if someone else has it, they can pretend to be you and get you banned. So you don't want that out there. Now that we've set up our environment, we want to know what is the match data we're looking at going to actually look like? Like how is it formatted? What's the information? Things like that. To do this, we're going to go over to the Riot API website and have a look at making a call on there. So I've jumped over to the Riot API website. You can see here on the left, there's all the endpoints. And I got one of my most recent match IDs, and we're going to look at that. So it's under the match v5 endpoint, the match ID request. Execute the request, and we get back a bunch of data. So I've gone ahead and copied this and saved this into a notepad file so we can view it better. Here's that data in the notepad file, so it allows us to look at it a little better. I'm using the plugin JS tool, and we're going to look at JSON viewer to actually see what's going on there. So you can see here at the top level, it's metadata, which has the data version, the match ID, and who's participating. So these are the strings that reference the players. Riot doesn't actually use your summoner name. They use a specific string of numbers and letters in the back end. And then the second top level thing is info. So we have all the stuff we actually want, like the game duration, the game name, things like that. And if you notice, when we jump down to one of the participants, we have a whole bunch of information here. And we wanted lane/role. So this player played top lane, and their role was solo. So they were a solo player in top lane. Now that we know what we want to get, let's start by actually loading in a player to test this. So I've just picked myself as an example. I've set my player name, my region, my routing. So this basically tells the Riot API where to look. Now we're going to get the actual match data. So I go ahead and use Riot Watcher's summoner by name request. So it gets the rest of the information about me, like my PUU ID, which is that string of numbers that's referenced, as well as some other stuff in the background. And then from there, we use the match list by PUU ID to get my most recent matches. I have Q420, so this is ranked solo queue. You can hop over to the Riot API site, and if you go to the documents for League of Legends, you can see the different queue IDs. So if you click on queueids.json here, and you scroll down, you'll see that 420 should be Summoner's Rift ranked 5v5. So this line right here will get the match ID of the most recent match. So the first item of the list, match history. Now we want to get the actual lane, role, win-loss from that match data. So we're going to go ahead and create a function called getMatchData that takes the last match ID, the player name, the player routing, and this LOL Watcher object that allows us to be an interaction point to Riot API. So we're going to create this function, getMatchData. So here's the function I was talking about. So first up, we get the match data by using that match ID, using the LOL Watchers functionality. If you want to learn more about this, you can just search Riot Watcher documentation and it'll bring you up all the information. So then at the top level, we want the participant data. Recall that we want essentially the information in this array here, all the stats. So we do that by going to the info group and then participants. As you can see here, we go to info and then participants. So we're getting essentially this whole stack of information from our 10 participants. The issue is we don't know which one of these participants is our actual player. So we iterate through each one of the items there. So you can see each one of these objects. And we check to see if their summoner name is the player name we're looking at. So one of the information bits provided here is summoner name. If we scroll down to here, so it says summoner name is IDA Adrian. That's not me, so we ignore that, which is essentially what's going on here. So if the summoner name equals our player name, we keep that participant data. Otherwise, we ignore it. So then we get our player stats. It's the same information. We just specifically call out the ID, so we extract this block. And of course, we wanted the lane and role information, so that's what's being extracted here on lines 38 and 39. And I also grabbed whether or not it was a win or a loss. As a reminder, Riot treats lane and role separate, so you could be like a bottom support, or a bottom carry, or a mid solo, things like that. Let's run this and see what we get out. So it looks like in my most recent 2 games, the Riot API thinks I played mid lane in the support role. Alright, so as a reminder, so far we have our most recent match data and the role and lane each match. We just need the challenger players to iterate over. So let's hop into the code and show how to do that as well. Okay, so I've imported LOL Watcher, put both the libraries, and I've imported this get match data import star. That means go to the file we previously wrote and import everything here. So you can use this function get match data in this other file. So I've gone ahead and set our region as Korea here, and then the player routing, oh, this should be Asia. The player routing, you want it to be the closest server, so it's usually Americas for anything on the western side of the world, but Asia for the eastern. And then I set my queue type as 25. So we need a function that gets our challenger players. Again, this is covered in Project 5 of the Riot API Bootcamp, so you can find that video on my channel. Otherwise, I'm going to go through this pretty fast. Here we have get challenger players. It takes the region, the queue type, and our LOL Watcher object. And it basically takes the entries of the object that's returned for the challenger players. Like all things classic with Riot, it doesn't actually return in a leaderboard value. So it's sorted to be the highest ranked to the lowest ranked player. And then we reset the indices here. From there, we just pull out the summoner names that we want to look at. So this function returns the summoner names as a list for the challenger players. Alright, so we need some way of getting the role / lane for each one of these challenger players, which is what this get challenger lane functionality does. So for a specific summoner name, we go ahead and do that match history pull function that we talked about previously in this get match data. So that's what's going on here on line 60 to 64. And then we create a list of the roles they played, the lanes they played, and whether or not they won or lost, and call that get match data to get that information for each one of the matches. There's an if-else block here because I wanted to structure it such that it'll say bottom underscore duo or bottom underscore support, things like that. Just make it easier to process later. Now that we have this data, we can take their most common lane and their most common role and just eventually dump this out as a result of this function. So now it's relatively simple. We just take that data, iterate over it, and append it into a data frame, which then gets dumped into an Excel. So I have the column names I want, lane, role, win rate, creating a data frame, and then iterating for every summoner name that we have from that list of challenger players, print it so we know what we're looking at. We get the challenger lane, and then from that we'll get the result of their preferred lane, their preferred role, and the win-loss ratio, of which we just append to our data frame. And then once we have that, we just save this to a file. So what does this actually look like? Well, this is the data you're going to get out of it. I changed the name here to be raw lane because I wanted to format some stuff, but essentially you'll have these 4 columns. From here, you can look at any kind of data analysis you want. I just used a pivot table to look at the count of each one in the challenger, so that's what you saw in the beginning slides, as well as what is their win rate. Actually, we can go ahead and see what the difference between what an equal weighting would be and what we have right now. So that's that. Okay. So we can see here that support is represented 6% more than with our expected 20%, whereas top is our minus 6%. So that's interesting to look at that. On our distribution, the only one that appears normal, so to speak, is AD carry at approximately 20%. So interesting find there. Hopefully this video inspired you to get started on the Riot API and see some cool things you can do with it. If you have a question, the data is out there. You just have to go and get it. As I mentioned before, I have a course called the Riot API Bootcamp. It takes you from knowing nothing all the way up to building your own app if you want to get started there. Beyond that, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I really love seeing what some of you guys are working on, so feel free to share that. With that being said, catch you in another video.